My family believed my sister's lie, disowned me, and left me to struggle on my own. Now they're asking me to save them from losing everything, so I'm letting them lose it all. Before I get into the story, you need to understand who I used to be and what they turned me into. My name is Ava Mitchell, and at 22, everything had been exactly where it was supposed to be: good grades, discipline, a future that felt solid, predictable, safe. I had just finished training, the kind that leaves your body exhausted but your mind calm, steady, in control, and I remember catching my breath thinking, I'm okay, I'm on the right path. And then I looked down at my phone. 37 missed calls. Messages flooding in so fast the screen kept jumping. At first, I told myself it had to be something normal in the worst way: an accident, a hospital call, something urgent but explainable. But the moment I opened the messages, that explanation collapsed. How could you? Don't come home. You're disgusting. My chest tightened, not all at once, but slowly, like something invisible was wrapping around my ribs and pulling tighter with every breath. This wasn't panic. Not yet. It was colder than that. Quieter. The kind of fear that doesn't scream it, settles in your bones, and refuses to leave. Then I saw the message that didn't make sense. My mom, the one person who always picked up, had sent just four words: Don't come home. Ever. I stared at it, waiting for it to mean something else. It didn't. I started calling back, one by one. No answer. Not my parents, not my sister, not even my closest friends. Even the one person who had never once turned on me didn't answer. It was like I had been erased in real time, like everyone had agreed on something about me, something final, and I was the only one who didn't know what it was. And that's when the feeling changed. It stopped being confusion. It turned into instinct. Sharp, heavy, certain. Something had happened. Something bad. Something big enough to make everyone turn against me at once, and I had no idea why. I grabbed my keys, hands unsteady now, my heartbeat too fast to ignore, like it already knew what I was about to walk into. The drive home felt wrong, too long, too quiet, like I was heading straight into something I couldn't stop anymore. And the entire time, one thought kept repeating in my head, clearer, darker, more terrifying every time it came back. What did they think I did? I pulled into the driveway, still trying to convince myself there had to be some kind of mistake, something simple, something fixable. But the moment I saw the cars lining the street, the porch light blazing in the middle of the day, something inside me dropped. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a scene I wasn't supposed to walk into. Before I could even open my door, it happened. The front door flew open, and my uncle came charging down the steps, his face twisted with a kind of anger I had never seen before. He yanked my door open so hard it bounced back, grabbed my arm, and slammed me against the side of the car. You think you can just show up after what you did? He shouted, his voice shaking with rage. I couldn't even process the words. What are you talking about? I said, but my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded small, wrong, like I had already lost something I didn't understand yet. They dragged me inside. The house was full, too full. Family, relatives, people who had known me my entire life, all standing there, all staring at me the same way. Not confused, not concerned, just certain. My mom was sitting on the couch, eyes swollen from crying. My dad stood near the doorway, his expression cold in a way I had never seen before. And then I saw her. Lily, curled up beside our grandmother, shaking, crying like something terrible had happened to her. The room went silent the second I stepped in. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, suffocating, like the air had been sucked out. I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to explain what was going on. No one did. How could you? My mom said finally, her voice breaking, but not with confusion, with anger, with disgust. My heart stuttered. How could I what? I asked. And this time I heard it, the fear in my own voice, creeping in whether I wanted it to or not. My dad stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. Your sister told us everything, he said. Each word felt like it landed before I could understand it. About what you've been doing to her. For years. For a second, I didn't react. I couldn't. It didn't make sense. The words were there, but they didn't connect to anything real. It was like hearing a language I didn't understand, and then it hit. Hard, sudden, violent. My vision blurred, like the world tilted just slightly off its axis. What? I laughed, but it came out wrong. Hollow. That's insane. I would never. She was terrified to tell us. My mom cut in, her voice rising. Do you have any idea what you've done to her? I didn't do anything. I said louder now, panic breaking through. This isn't real. This isn't happening. But it didn't matter. Lily was crying harder, clinging to our grandmother, shaking her head like she couldn't even look at me. You said no one would believe me, she whispered. You said it was our secret. And just like that, it was over. I felt it. Not physically, something deeper than that. Like the ground I had been standing on my entire life had just disappeared beneath me. Every face in that room shifted from familiar to foreign in a matter of seconds. The people who had raised me, who had known me, who had trusted me, were looking at me like I was something they didn't recognize anymore, something dangerous. I tried to speak again, tried to explain, to grab onto anything that could make this make sense, but it was like screaming into a void. No one was listening. They weren't even hearing me. They had already decided who I was. And then my dad moved. I didn't even see it coming. One second he was standing there. The next his fist connected with my jaw so hard it knocked me off balance. The room spun. I tasted blood. Get out, he said, his voice low, shaking with something that sounded like hate. You're not my daughter. Not anymore. That was the moment everything flipped. Not slowly, not gradually, instantly. The rules I had lived by, the trust I thought I had, the identity I believed in it, all collapsed in a matter of minutes. I wasn't being questioned. I wasn't being heard. I was being erased. And the worst part, the part that hit deeper than anything else, was that they didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Not one person in that room stopped and said, wait, this doesn't make sense. Not one person asked me if it was true. In that moment, I understood something I never thought I would have to learn. When your family stops believing in you, you don't just lose them. You lose the ground you stand on. And there's nothing to catch you when it's gone. If you've ever felt your life fall apart faster than you could understand it, drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. And if you want to hear how this ends, don't forget to subscribe. Because what happened next wasn't a moment. It was a slow collapse. It didn't hit me all at once. That would have been easier. Instead, it came in pieces, quiet, relentless, impossible to stop. The next morning, I woke up in my car with a splitting headache and dried blood still on my lip, and for a second, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. But then, my phone buzzed. An email from my university. Tuition overdue. Access restricted. Enrollment at risk. I stared at the screen, trying to process it, but my mind couldn't catch up. By the end of the day, I found out my parents had pulled every payment. Tuition, insurance, everything. Just like that, my future, the one I had spent years building, was gone. Not damaged, not delayed, gone. I tried to fix it. I went to financial aid, filled out forms, asked questions, stood in lines that felt like they stretched forever. But without a cosigner, without credit, without anyone willing to even answer my calls, there was nothing they could do. I dropped to part-time. Then I picked up shifts wherever I could night security, anything that didn't ask questions. I told myself it was temporary, that someone would realize this didn't make sense, that my parents would come back, that the truth would matter. It didn't. The rumors spread faster than I could keep up with. I never heard them directly, not at first, but I felt them. In the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room, in the way people avoided eye contact, in the way girls quietly moved away if I sat too close in class. No one said anything out loud, but they didn't have to. I could see it in their faces. I had gone from someone people respected to someone they watched, judged, feared, like I was something dangerous. And that's when it started to feel real. Not just what my family had done, but what it meant. I wasn't just losing them, I was losing who I was. My truck broke down a few months later. Engine gone. I couldn't afford to fix it. That cost me my second job. Without that income, I couldn't keep up with rent. And just like that, I was out again. Only this time, there was nowhere to go. I started sleeping wherever I could. A couch if someone felt generous, a locker room bench. Eventually, nowhere. Just empty spaces that didn't belong to anyone. I stopped looking at mirrors after a while. It was easier that way. The person staring back didn't look like me anymore anyway. One night, I was working security outside a bar, trying to stay invisible, trying to just get through another shift without being noticed. But someone recognized me, not from who I used to be, but from what people said I was. He started talking, loud enough for others to hear. Words like sick, predator, thrown around like facts. I didn't respond, I didn't fight it. I just stood there and let it pass through me. Until it didn't. They followed me after my shift. Three of them. I didn't even see it coming. The first hit knocked the air out of me. The rest came fast. Kicks, punches, accusations I couldn't answer. I tried to fight back, but it didn't matter. It was never about a fight. It was about punishment, about making sure I didn't hurt anyone else. I remember lying there afterward, staring up at nothing, trying to breathe through the pain, wondering how it had gotten this far. Not just the injuries, not just the broken ribs or the blood, but everything. My life, my name, my identity. All of it rewritten by a lie. And the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the silence after. No one came looking. No one asked if I was okay. Because to them, I wasn't someone worth asking about anymore. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a student. I wasn't even a person they knew. I was just what they believed I was. And when enough people believe a lie, it stops feeling like a lie at all. I stopped counting the days somewhere along the way because counting only reminded me that nothing was changing. My name is Ava Mitchell, and at some point, my life didn't collapse all at once. It just kept slipping piece by piece until there was nothing left to hold on to. I was living out of my car by then, if you could even call it living. The back seat was my bed, a pile of clothes, my pillow, and whatever I could afford from gas stations was all I ate. The bruises had faded, but the pain had in my ribs still ached when I breathed too deep, my shoulders stiff, my body quietly reminding me of everything that had happened. Bills stacked up faster than I could look at them, so I stopped opening them. At some point, survival stopped feeling like something I was fighting for and started feeling like something I was just dragging behind me. I wasn't thinking about the future anymore. I wasn't even thinking about tomorrow, just the next hour, then the next, and even that felt like too much. What hurt more than the hunger or the cold was the silence. 3 years, not a single call, not one message asking if I was alive, if I was okay, if I needed anything. I used to check my phone out of habit, unlocking it like something might finally be there, but it never was. At first, I told myself they needed time, that eventually someone would realize something didn't make sense, that the truth would matter. But time passed, and nothing came. No apologies, no questions, just absence. And after a while, That absence stopped feeling temporary. It started to feel permanent, like I had been replaced, erased, rewritten into someone they could all live without. And the worst part was, I started to believe it. Because if everyone sees you the same way long enough, it gets harder to remember who you used to be. The night it finally broke me, it wasn't dramatic. No storm, no thunder, just steady, cold rain that soaked through everything and made the world feel heavier than it already was. I drove without thinking until I found myself at an old bridge just outside town, the kind of place you pass 100 times and never notice. But that night it felt different, like it had been waiting. I parked the car and sat there, hands still on the wheel, listening to the rain hit the roof. And for the first time in years, my mind went quiet. No anger, no confusion, no questions. Just stillness. Not peaceful, just empty. I stepped out, climbed over the railing, and stood there, looking down into the dark water below. My ribs protested with every breath, but it barely registered. The pain didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. I had my phone in my hand without even thinking about it. I unlocked it one last time. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. Just the same empty screen that had followed me for years. And then a thought came. Not loud, not sudden, just quiet and steady, like it had been there all along. No one was coming, no one was looking for me. If I disappeared right then, nothing would change. The world would keep moving. People would keep living. And whatever version of me they believed in would still be the only one that existed. I tightened my grip on the cold metal railing, rain soaking through my clothes, and for a second, just 1 second, I wondered if anyone would even notice I was gone. And the answer came back just as quiet as everything else. No. And that was the moment I realized I hadn't been holding on anymore. I had already let go. And then something interrupted the silence. It wasn't loud, not dramatic, just the sound of a car door closing somewhere behind me, followed by slow, steady footsteps against the wet pavement. For a second, I thought I imagined it. My hands were still gripping the cold metal railing, the rain soaking through my clothes, my mind already somewhere far away. But then a voice cut through the quiet, calm, low, and strangely normal. You're going to get sick standing out here like that. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't panicked. It didn't carry fear or judgment, just a simple observation, like he was talking about the weather. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I didn't have anything left to say. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind me. He didn't come closer, didn't try to grab me, didn't raise his voice. He just stayed there. I'm not going to ask you what happened, he said after a moment. And I'm not going to tell you it'll all be okay. I don't know your story. There was a pause, the kind that felt intentional, like he was choosing his next words carefully. But I do know one thing, he added quietly. People don't end up here because they're weak. They end up here because they've been holding on for too long. Something about that made my grip tighten. Not because it scared me, because it felt like he had seen something I didn't want anyone to see. I finally turned around. He was older, maybe late 60s, early 70s. Rain had soaked through his jacket, but he didn't seem to notice. There was no shock on his face, no pity, no suspicion. Just a kind of steady, grounded presence that felt unfamiliar. Name's Frank, he said, like this was any normal introduction. Like we weren't standing on opposite sides of something I couldn't come back from. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Words felt too heavy, too complicated. But he didn't push. He didn't fill the silence. He just stood there, letting it exist between us. After a while, he spoke again. There's a diner about 10 minutes from here, he said, nodding back toward the road. Open all night. Food's not great, but it's hot. He shrugged slightly, like it wasn't a big deal. You don't have to talk. You don't have to explain anything. Just come sit somewhere warm for a bit. That was it. No pressure, no expectations, no conditions. Just an offer. I don't know why I moved. Maybe because it was the first time in years someone had spoken to me like I was still a person. Not a problem, not a rumor, not something broken or dangerous, just someone worth talking to. I climbed back over the railing slowly, my hands numb, my body heavier than it had been minutes before. He didn't reach out to help me. He didn't need to. He just stepped back enough to give me space, like he trusted I could still do it on my own. We drove in silence. He didn't ask questions, didn't glance at me like he was trying to figure me out. The diner lights were too bright when we walked in, the warmth almost uncomfortable at first. He ordered coffee, eggs, toast, pushed the plate toward me without saying anything. I stared at it for a second, unsure what to do. It had been so long since someone had given me something without expecting something back. You should eat, he said simply. That was it. And somehow, that was enough. The first bite felt strange, then another. And before I realized it, I was eating like my body had remembered something my mind had forgotten. He didn't watch me, didn't comment, just sat there, quietly, like this was exactly where he was supposed to be, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't tell him my story that night. He didn't ask, but when we finally left, he paused by his truck and looked at me for a moment, not like he was judging, not like he was trying to decide something, just looking. I've got a spare room, he said. Nothing fancy, but it's dry and it's quiet. Another small pause. You can stay a few days. Get your footing back, that's all. A few days. That's what he called it. But in that moment, standing there under the dim parking lot lights, something shifted not loudly, not all at once, just slightly. For the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel completely closed off. It didn't feel like I was already gone because one person had looked at me and still seen someone worth saving. Those few days, Frank mentioned, didn't fix anything overnight. If anything, they showed me how broken everything still was. The first morning I woke up in his spare room, I didn't move for a long time. The bed was too soft, the silence too quiet in a way that didn't feel empty, it felt unfamiliar. My body didn't trust it. My mind kept waiting for something to go wrong, but nothing did. Frank was already up, coffee on the table, like this was just another normal day. He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't ask what I was going to do next. He just said, there's some work in the back if you feel like keeping busy. And for some reason, that mattered. Not being pushed, not being judged, just being given the option to exist again. At first, I stayed small. I helped where I could, cleaning up around his shop, sorting boxes, doing things that didn't require thinking too much. My body healed faster than my mind did. The bruises faded. The pain in my ribs softened. But inside, everything still felt fragile, like one wrong moment could send me right back to that bridge. Some days I barely spoke. Some days I couldn't even look people in the eye. But Frank never forced it. He'd just nod, hand me a task, and let me move at my own pace. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, not yet, but stability. A ground that didn't disappear beneath me. A few weeks churned into months. Frank started trusting me with more small responsibilities at first, then things that actually mattered. I began earning my own money again. Not much, but enough to remind me that I wasn't completely lost. At his suggestion, I started seeing a therapist in town. The first session, I barely spoke. The second, I said a few words. By the third, the silence started to crack. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, uncomfortable, sometimes exhausting. but it was something. For the first time, someone listened not to judge, not to decide who I was, but to understand. And that alone started to change the way I saw myself. Going back to school felt impossible at first. The idea of stepping into a place where everything had fallen apart, it scared me more than I wanted to admit. But piece by piece, with night classes, online credits, and a lot of hesitation, I found my way back, not to the same place, not to the same version of myself, but to something new, something quieter, stronger in a different way. I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. I just focused on moving forward, one step at a time. And somewhere along the way, I met Sophie. It wasn't dramatic, no instant connection, no moment that changed everything. She worked part time at the same diner Frank had taken me to that first night. At first, it was just small things, a nod when I came in, a simple coffee without needing to ask twice. She didn't know my story. She didn't treat me like someone broken. She treated me like anyone else. And that, more than anything, made me notice her. We started talking in fragments, short conversations. Nothing too deep, nothing too fast. But over time, those fragments turned into something steady, something real. The first time she laughed at something I said, it caught me off guard. Not because it was rare, but because I realized I hadn't heard that sound directed at me in a long time. The first time she asked me a question and actually waited for my answer, I felt something shift again. Not all at once, just enough to remind me that trust wasn't gone forever. It was just buried. Healing didn't come back like a light switch. It didn't erase what happened. It didn't give me back the years I lost or the person I used to be. But it gave me something else. Something quieter, more honest. A sense that I could build something again, not from who I was before, but from who I had become. And for the first time, in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I had lost. It felt like something I could slowly, carefully begin to create again. It didn't happen all at once, the feeling of stability. It didn't arrive like relief or some big, undeniable shift. It came quietly, almost carefully, like something testing whether it was safe to stay. The days became more predictable, the nights less heavy. I started waking up without that immediate weight pressing down on my chest, without the instinct to check if everything was about to fall apart again. Life didn't feel perfect, it just felt steady. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Work with Frank turned into something more than just a way to survive. It became something I could take pride in. What started as small tasks grew into real responsibility, then into opportunity. I learned how to manage things, how to make decisions again, how to trust my own judgment without second guessing every step. Eventually, I saved enough to move into a place of my own. It wasn't big, it wasn't impressive, but it was mine. A space where nothing felt temporary, where nothing could be taken away overnight. That mattered more than anything I had lost before. School didn't feel like a battlefield anymore either. It felt like progress. I finished what I had once thought was gone forever. Not in the same way, not with the same expectations, but with something stronger underneath it. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I was still worthy. I already knew that now. And that changed everything. My career followed that same path. Slow, deliberate, built on consistency instead of pressure. The kind of growth that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but feels solid from within. And Sophie? She became part of that steadiness without ever forcing it. There wasn't a single moment where everything suddenly changed. No grand declaration, no turning point that demanded attention. It was smaller than that, quieter, built through everyday things, conversations that didn't feel guarded, silence that didn't feel uncomfortable, trust that didn't have to be explained. She didn't ask me to be who I used to be. She didn't expect me to be anything other than who I was becoming. and that made it easy, in a way I hadn't thought was possible, to let her in. When I asked her to marry me, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like a decision I had already been living toward for a long time. There was no fear attached to it. No doubt about whether I deserved this kind of life, just a quiet certainty that this what we had built was real. Our home, our routines, the way we moved through life together, it all felt grounded in something I had once lost and slowly found again. The past didn't disappear. It never does. There are still moments, even now, where something small will bring it back: a look, a word, a silence that feels too familiar. But those moments don't define me anymore. They don't pull me under the way they used to. They exist and then they pass. Because I've learned something I didn't understand before. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about making peace with what stays. And somewhere along the way, without realizing exactly when it happened, I stopped waiting for everything to fall apart. I stopped expecting the ground beneath me to disappear. I stopped needing the past to explain the present. What I had now wasn't perfect. It wasn't untouched by what came before. But it was mine. Chosen, built, protected. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. It had been 7 years since the last time anyone from my family had tried to reach me. 7 years of silence so complete that I had stopped expecting it to ever break. And then, one afternoon, while I was at work, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. I didn't recognize it at first, not consciously, but something in me did. Something older than logic. Something buried deep enough that I had learned to live without it. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. It stopped. Then it rang again. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I was curious, but because I already knew this wasn't going to be simple. When I finally answered, I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. Hello? My mother's voice. It didn't sound the way I remembered. Softer, maybe, or just older. For a second, everything inside me went completely still. Not the kind of stillness I had felt on that bridge years ago. This was sharper, controlled, like something had locked into place. I didn't think you'd pick up, she said, her voice unsteady in a way I had never heard before. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't emotional. I was alert. The way you are when something unexpected happens and your mind starts scanning for what it means. We need to talk, she continued. It's about your sister. There it was. The name I hadn't said out loud in years. Something shifted in my chest. Not pain, not fear, something colder. I'm listening, I said finally. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything. There was a pause on the other end, long enough that I almost thought she'd hung up, and then she said it. She told us the truth. The words didn't land all at once. They didn't hit like a shock. They unfolded slowly, piece by piece, like my mind was refusing to process them too quickly. What truth? I asked, even though part of me already knew. Another pause. A breath. She lied, my mother said, her voice breaking now. About everything. All of it. She admitted it. There was never anything. She made it up. For a moment, I didn't feel anything at all. No anger, no relief, no satisfaction. Just a strange, hollow quiet, as if the weight I had carried for years had suddenly disappeared, but left something behind that I didn't know how to fill. And then it came. Not all at once, not like an explosion, but like pressure building in a place that had been sealed for too long. 7 years. 7 years of being erased, of losing everything, of rebuilding something out of nothing. And now, this. That's it, I said, before I could stop myself. My voice was still calm, but underneath it, something sharper had begun to surface. That's what you're calling about? It's not just that, she rushed to say. She's not doing well. And we didn't know how to tell you. We didn't know how to fix it. Fix it. The word landed harder than anything else she had said. I let out a breath, slow and controlled, forcing the anger to stay where it was contained but no longer hidden. There's nothing to fix, I said. Please, she said, and now there was something else in her voice. Not authority, not certainty, something closer to need. We need to see you. We need to talk. You deserve to hear everything. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how late it all was. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one standing in that living room trying to explain herself while no one listened, the one who had begged to be believed, the one who had lost everything in a matter of minutes. And then I thought about who I was now. The difference between those two people wasn't just time, it was survival. I already heard everything I needed to hear, I said quietly. 7 years ago. There was silence on the other end again, heavier this time. I know this doesn't change what happened, she said finally, her voice barely holding together. But you have to understand. No, I cut in, not raising my voice, not losing control, just ending it. You have to understand. And for the first time since the call began, I felt it clearly. Not confusion, not shock, power. You believed her without question, I continued. You didn't ask me. You didn't listen. You didn't even hesitate. My grip tightened slightly around the phone, but my voice stayed steady. That wasn't a mistake, I said. That was a choice. There was nothing left for her to say after that, because the truth had finally come out. But it hadn't brought anything back with it. No relief. No closure. No version of the life I had lost. Just a quiet, undeniable realization settling in stronger than anything I had felt before. The truth had come too late, and I was no longer the person who needed it. I agreed to meet them a week later, not because I needed closure, but because I wanted to see with my own eyes what 7 years had turned them into. We chose a quiet cafe on the edge of town, neutral ground, somewhere that didn't belong to either of us. I arrived early out of habit. When they walked in, I recognized them immediately, and at the same time, I didn't. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her posture folded in on itself. My father's hair had gone gray at the temples, his expression no longer sharp, just tired. And Lily, she stayed a step behind them, avoiding my eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't heavy like it used to be. It was thin, awkward, almost fragile. Then my mother stepped forward, her voice trembling as she said my name. Not the way she used to say it with certainty, with ownership, but like she wasn't sure she had the right anymore. She started apologizing immediately, words rushing over each other, fragmented, desperate. My father followed, slower, more measured, but the message was the same. They were sorry. They should have listened. They should have asked questions. They should have done everything differently. I stood there, listening, feeling the words pass through me without landing. I had imagined this moment, once dreamed about it, even, but the reality of it felt empty because the person who had needed that apology didn't exist anymore. We sat down, and for a while they talked. They explained things I hadn't asked for. How Lily had broken down, how the truth had come out, how everything had unraveled afterward. I nodded when it felt appropriate, but I didn't interrupt. Not because I agreed, because I didn't need to argue anymore. I already knew what had happened. What I didn't understand was why now. Why after all this time? And then, slowly, the conversation shifted. It wasn't obvious at first, just small details. A mention of financial trouble, a reference to the house. My father hesitated before speaking again, his hands tightening slightly on the table. Things haven't been easy, he said. My mother glanced at him, then back at me, like they were silently deciding who would say it out loud. And in that moment, something inside me went cold, not shocked, not confused, just certain. I had seen this before. Not the situation, but the pattern, the hesitation, the way they circled around what they actually wanted. And when they finally said it, when the words, "we might lose the house," and "we don't know where else to turn," landed between us, it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It clarified everything. Because that was the moment I understood. They hadn't come back for me. They had come back for what I had become. The anger didn't explode. It didn't need to. It settled into something quieter, sharper, more controlled. I leaned back slightly, studying them in a way I never had before. Not as my parents, not as the people who raised me, but as strangers. People making a request. A transaction. My mother reached for my hand, hesitating just before touching it, as if unsure whether she was allowed. "We know we don't deserve anything," she said softly, "but we're asking anyway." My father didn't speak, but his silence said enough. And Lily, she still hadn't looked at me. Not once. I let the moment stretch just long enough for them to feel it. The space between what they expected and what was actually happening. Then I pulled my hand back, not abruptly, just enough to make the distance clear. "You're right," I said, my voice steady, almost calm. "You don't deserve anything." I saw it then, the flicker of realization in their eyes, the shift from hope to something closer to fear. Not because I raised my voice, not because I was angry, but because they finally understood something they hadn't before. I wasn't the person they had left behind. And I wasn't the person they could ask anymore. The realization settled over the table like a quiet line I wasn't willing to let them cross. For a long moment, no one spoke. My mother's hand lingered in the space between us, uncertain, as if she still believed there was a version of me who would reach back. My father kept his eyes on the table, jaw tight, waiting for something, permission maybe, or forgiveness dressed up as help. And Lily, she finally looked at me, not with defiance, not with the certainty she once had, just fragile, like the story she had built had collapsed under its own weight. I held her gaze for a second, long enough to see the truth there, not the version they had believed, not the version that had destroyed me, but the one that came too late. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something shift. Not anger, not relief, something quieter, something I hadn't expected. "I believe you," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, and I watched the words land on her like something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for. "I believe that you lied." The sentence hung there for a second, strange in its simplicity. My mother inhaled sharply. My father looked up, confusion flickering across his face, but Lily didn't look away. "And I believe," I continued, not raising my voice, not rushing the moment, "that whatever led you to do that wasn't simple. I wasn't excusing it. I wasn't rewriting what had happened. But I wasn't carrying it the same way anymore either. I don't need to hold on to that," I said quietly. "Not for you, not for me." And that was the truth. The version of me who had needed to fight for recognition, who had needed someone to say, "I believe you." She was gone. What was left didn't need it anymore. But forgiveness didn't move in every direction. I turned my attention back to my parents, and whatever softness had been there a moment ago disappeared. Not violently, not dramatically. Just completely. "What you did," I said, my voice steady, stripped of anything emotional, "wasn't confusion." I let the words sit long enough to make sure they understood them. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't a mistake. My father shifted in his seat, my mother's expression tightening, as if she already knew where this was going. "You didn't just believe her," I continued. "You chose not to hear me." I wasn't angry anymore. That was the part that surprised them the most. There was no edge to my voice, no need to convince them. Just clarity. You had one job, I said. To stop, to ask, to hesitate. And you didn't. I shook my head slightly, not in disbelief, but in finality. That's not something I can rebuild from. My mother tried to speak, her voice breaking as she reached for words that didn't exist. We thought, she started, but I didn't let her finish. Not out of anger, out of certainty. I know what you thought, I said, and I know what you didn't do. I leaned back slightly, putting space between us again, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. You asked me here because you need something. I continued, my tone unchanged. Not because you found the truth. Not because you came back for me. Because you ran out of options. The words weren't sharp, they didn't need to be. They were simply accurate. My father exhaled slowly, like he had been holding something in for too long, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. I'm not going to help you, I said finally. No hesitation, no softening, just a clear, immovable line. Not financially, not personally, not in any way that puts me back in your life. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. Final. Lily lowered her gaze again, tears slipping quietly down her face, but I didn't move to comfort her. I didn't need to. I had already given her what I chose to give: acknowledgement, not reconciliation. My mother's shoulders sank. My father's posture stiffened, as if the weight of what they had lost was finally catching up to them. But it wasn't my weight to carry anymore. I stood up slowly, not rushed, not dramatic, just done. You can take care of each other, I said, my voice calm, almost distant. That's not my responsibility. I paused for a moment, not because I was reconsidering, but because I wanted them to understand one last thing. Forgiveness, I said quietly, doesn't mean I come back. And then I turned and walked away, not looking back this time, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left there for me to return to. I didn't look back when I left that cafe, and I haven't needed to since. The life waiting for me now is quieter, steadier, built on choices that don't disappear overnight. Sophie is home when I walk through the door, not as a symbol of everything I lost, but as proof of everything I built after. The way she smiles, the way she asks how my day was and actually listens, those small things matter more than anything I used to chase. And now, with a child on the way, something shifts even deeper. It's not fear anymore. It's responsibility, but not the kind that weighs you down, the kind that roots you. I don't think about the past the same way I used to. It's still there, but it doesn't control anything. It doesn't define what I deserve or what I'm capable of building. I've learned that peace isn't about fixing what broke you. It's about choosing what you carry forward and what you finally leave behind. Family, I realized, isn't about who raised you. It's about who stays when there's nothing left to take from you. It's about who sees you clearly, without rumors, without conditions, and chooses you anyway. That's what I have now. Not perfect, not untouched, but real. And for the first time in my life, that's enough. This story reflects one personal journey and perspective. Situations like this are complex, and every family dynamic is different. What worked here might not apply to everyone. If this story made you feel something, take a second to share your own perspective, your honest thoughts, or your psychological take on what happened in the comments. I read them all. And if you want more real stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for being here and listening.